everyone. Again, thank you to the Miller Art Museum for, of course, hosting this show and then having our organization here to speak about the Topelmanns and some of the pieces in our collection. As Marie said, I'm Cody Schreck. I am the Executive Director of the Ephraim Historical Foundation. And I'm here to kind of build off some of those fantastic stories that Kathleen shared with all of us and kind of give some context of some of the pieces by the Topelmanns in our collection and why we feel they're important to the collection and why we preserve them. And then just briefly, for those who are not familiar, I know I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but the Ephraim Historical Foundation itself was founded back in 1949 as a nonprofit historic preservation organization. We have the mission of preserving, sustaining, and sharing the history and beauty of Ephraim, Wisconsin. And as a part of our mission, we do preserve historic buildings. That's one of the many things we do. It's probably one of the more public-facing things we do, but we also do much more than that as well. We do focus heavily on things like multi-generational education, exhibitions, tours, and a robust slate of programming as well. In all, we're a public-facing institution that really tries to engage with the community and make history accessible and fun for people. And as a part of our mission, we also steward a very large collection of artifacts and documents. So we have thousands of photographs, paper documents, everything like that. Included in that is an art collection, a pretty sizable art collection. So I actually did the math about 2 days ago before I came here, and we're at about 730 plus pieces of art in our collection, which is pretty sizable for an organization of our size. And of course, within that large art collection are pieces by Karsten and Ellen. So I brought a few here today. I have 2 on the table here to share, but I wanted to speak about a few in our collection, kind of share them with you. So. The first one we're going to look at is some that you might be familiar with, or one you might be familiar with. It's a winter greeting card that features a piece done by Ellen. So this was actually donated to our organization by one of our longtime volunteers and members. She was an artist herself. Her name was Martha Hackmeister Cherry. She lived in Ephraim for a long time. She was German as well, but she also, when she died, actually gave us a large collection of her own personal art and her own art collection. And within the folders of art was this card. It's a greeting card. She must have received it from a friend or had maybe sent it to a friend and got it back or something like that. But what she had done is she actually, you can see on the top, she actually tore off the actual message and just kept the art itself, which is interesting. So I think that really speaks to how well respected and loved the Topelmann's art was in Ephraim, especially by locals. You know, we had a person here living in Ephraim for a lot of her life who thought it was important to not only keep this, but also donate it with her own art as well. And I think it's interesting, you know, the piece itself, it evokes a really, you know, comfy mood. It's interesting. I'll talk about this a lot with this balance of steeples, especially in Karsten's work as well. But including both the steeples as kind of the setting, and Ellen just doing a fantastic job of creating that kind of idyllic winter mood with Ephraim as a setting. And you have these people kind of enjoying their evening with a Christmas tree and the dog, and this kind of light and smoke emanating from the churches. It brings that feeling of comfiness and togetherness of community on like the cold winter night. So I thought this was a very interesting one for you all to see, and we can jump ahead to the next one too. This one should look familiar. It's actually sitting right on the wall over there. This is a very well-known painting by Ellen Wilson's. This is one of the pieces that we loaned to this exhibition. We've loaned several others as well. But this one was actually purchased by an individual in Ephraim, and then actually from the gallery, purchased directly from the gallery, and then donated directly to us. And it captures, of course, you know, the quintessential Ephraim establishment in Wilson's, and puts it in the context of a joyous community, which, based on, you know, the stories that Kathleen shared with us, is very much, you know, in tune with the themes and the inspirations for Ellen. I love this piece because it forces perspective that's not really there if you've ever been in this spot. It kind of forces this plaza of people in front of Ephraim, or in front of Wilson's, and also you see what's Cherry Street, essentially, is that long street going all the way up the hill, which historically actually did. It used to go all the way up the hill. Now there's a staircase stopping it. But she's also forced to include, you know, Bethany Church in the background and the Anderson Hotel in the background, which I think was fantastic. And you heard Kathleen share a story about Wilson's, and I mean, it's interesting that Wilson's was so important to the Topelmanns early on. You know, there was once, the bread story, there was once a small grocery section in Wilson's where, you know, Ellen would go in and buy the inexpensive bread. and transform it into bread pudding for the family. So Wilson served an important function for the family early on. But there's also a very interesting story, which I'm not sure has been shared yet before. It's a somewhat common story, not so common, in that it's actually about the piece itself. Someone came in to buy this piece of Wilson's. It wasn't necessarily for sale, but Ellen said, the actual Wilson's is for sale, not this painting. So those individuals actually walked over and ended up purchasing the actual Wilson's. So instead of getting the painting, they got the building itself. And it's interesting because this painting may have been the inspiration for the red and white awnings that are on the building now. When the individuals bought the building, there actually was not red and white awnings. Ellen had put that on there. So whether or not that had been there historically at some point, and Ellen was inspired by that, or I know in the talk that Lars and Lisa did, they talked about, that the Hanseatic lead, the red, white colors, and you see the banners. I don't know if there's, any sort of inspiration by that. Either way, this could have been inspiration for the red and white awnings. So again, just speaks to, the importance of Ellen's work and, capturing this kind of classic historical scene. This one's a little different. This one's not a piece necessarily, it's a book. We have this book in our collection. We keep it in our non-lending library. It was published in 1999 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of our organization. So it's titled Half a Century with the Ephraim Foundation. And it's pretty plain to see the piece they chose was Our Village by Ellen Topelmann, which is right there in the back. I think it's telling that, the individuals, as they put this book together, there's a lot of art that depicts Ephraim over the years. By a lot, a myriad of artists. This is the one they chose to represent the anniversary of a historic preservation organization after its 50 years. So it speaks to the fact that, Ellen's work was very well respected in the community, and she had a keen ability to capture kind of the joyous, historically focused community of Ephraim. This one might be one of my favorites in the collection. This is a watercolor by Karsten. It measures about 34 by 28 framed. There were, I believe, prints made from a variation of this work that you may have seen before. It came into our collection because one of our longtime contributors, his name was Paul Burton, he's still around, he actually purchased this from the gallery and then donated it to us. And what's interesting in talking with Lars and Lisa, I didn't know this, I unfortunately have never met Paul, but this is essentially, a forced perspective view of where the Burton property is. So he, probably saw this and felt it was a beautiful view, and of course captures a lot of historicity in it. But again, much like the Wilson's piece, stretches perspective to put a lot of things in conversation, which I think is awesome. You have your classic downtown Ephraim with the Bluff and the Tower and Horseshoe Island and Nicolay Bay Beach and the Strawberry Islands and Chambers Island, all forced into one perspective, which you're not going to see in real life, which is, I think, incredible. But it also, I think, is a great piece that's indicative of Karsten's styles throughout some of his other paintings too. You have nature, serenity, the capturing of kind of a calm Ephraim mood on a fall day, and also the balance again. Those two steeples down there that kind of are the anchor point for this perspective, those two steeples that kind of anchor you in place. We'll jump back to the next one. This is a unique one. This is one I brought with me, so afterwards, if after questions you have time, you want to come take a look, we have this piece here. Some of you probably recognize this because you were probably there when it was given out. This is the 2012 Fear Ball Medallion. So show of hands who doesn't know what Fear Ball is, because I see a lot of individuals here who have been there. I think I see a chieftain here as well. So for those of you who don't know, Fear Ball is pretty much the premier annual festival in Ephraim. It takes place in June. It's kind of a celebration. They say it's the burning of the winter witch to celebrate the coming of summer. So a big bonfire is erected and a community member is selected as chieftain, and they're brought in kind of secretly on a boat, and they start this fire to kind of kick off the event. Karsten himself served as chieftain in 2003. And in 2012, he was selected to create the medallion for Nancy Davis, who was the chieftain that year. So this is a unique piece done by Karsten. It's three-dimensional. In talking with Lars, we think, someone helped him cut the wood. But other than that, he did, paint this kind of little bonfire here with the red Fear Ball medallion or Fear Ball symbol, and then it's kind of gold leafed, which is a cool example of Karsten's ability to use gold leafing. And being selected to be chieftain, of course, is an honor, but also to be the artist to create the medallion is an honor in itself. So it speaks really to Karsten's respect in the community as an artist and also as a community member. This one I was going to talk about, it's another book, but we'll skip ahead to this one. I brought a copy. It's a work of Karsten that's on there, but we'll jump ahead to this one. So this is another kind of unique work by Karsten, not something you're going to see in this exhibit necessarily, but an example of his graphic design work. So in 2003, Karsten was tasked with creating the logo for Ephraim's sesquicentennial, I always messed that word up, the 150th anniversary of Ephraim. So this piece is here too, you can come take a look. It's hand-drawn, it's got whiteout on it, it's got Karsten's handwriting on it, it's kind of behind a film here, used to create the logo for Ephraim's 150th, and a bunch of stickers and merchandise are made from this. You'll probably still see this logo around town sometimes. But because Karsten had professional training in graphic design, he was tasked with kind of doing this. And it's a unique piece in our collection because generally what we have from the Topelmanns is their classic works, and this is a graphic design piece, which I think is fantastic. And if you jump ahead to the next one. And as we're talking about logos, I thought it would be kind of necessary and interesting to talk about the fact that not many people know that our logo, the one you see there on my shirt and other places, was designed by Karsten. So the Ephraim Historical Foundation logo was designed by Karsten Topelmann in collaboration with some others. So that story actually starts much earlier than this concept in 2016. This actually starts, this kind of relationship building that brought us to him creating our logo started back when Karsten actually first arrived in the States back in the 1950s. One of our previous presidents at the time, back in the 1950s, he was a young kid going to Northwestern University. His name's Dick Volkman. He was going to Northwestern University. His father was a first-generation German immigrant living in Chicago. And his father invited him to a kind of German social club gathering. And at that social club gathering was Karsten. Karsten had just arrived recently in Chicago. He had been invited to this group, and Dick and Karsten were around the same age and kind of hit it off and became friends. They talked for a while. They had kind of gone their separate ways over the years, until about the 1970s, when Dick Volkman was at his family's home in Ephraim and happened to be in town and see that Karsten was opening a gallery downtown. So again, they sparked up that friendship again, became very close. Dick, bought pieces from the gallery all the time. Dick and his wife visited Karsten and Ellen while they were in Rothenburg, kind of just knocked on their door. But in 2016, Dick approached Karsten and said, I really love what you did with the 2003 logo. Can we do something like that for the Ephraim Historical Foundation? Our previous logo had been a picture of or an image of the bluff with kind of the sun setting, which was beautiful, but Dick felt, like we're a historic preservation, let's include the historic buildings. And of course, Karsten himself loved the architecture, the two steeples, so they went to work on that. And this was the first logo concept that they came up with. And you can see, there's a lot of historic buildings in here. There's two buildings that stand out because they stretch beyond the borders. It's the two steeples, the two buildings that really anchor into the place. And then if we jump ahead here to the next one, that brings us to our current logo. So they used that first logo concept as an adaptation for this next one. And what was happening is they were kind of going through meetings that Dick said they had about a dozen meetings about the logo. They were looking at fonts, how you lay out the buildings. And then one of the meetings, Karsten was looking at the fonts and the logo and everything. He said, what if we drop Ephraim so the P and the I touch the top of the steeples? And everyone looked at it and they said, that's it, let's do that. That was the end of that. That became our logo. We still utilize that logo today. People often comment on, it's interesting that the two churches touch the letters. It works together. But I think this logo story, it speaks to the many, incredible impacts that Karsten and Ellen had on the community and the people of Ephraim, and of course on our organization. There are many other pieces in our collection by the Topelmanns, but I felt, these were unique pieces that I would want to share with you. And then if you have any questions for Kathleen or I think now would probably be the time. So thank you very much for, participating in the So does anyone have any questions for me or Kathleen from either of our presentations? And if not, we will be here for a little bit up at the table for some of the pieces that I brought, if you have questions that way as well. Well, thank you very much.